We're super happy to see so many attendees today here, because for me, I would be really interested to learn more about this field. For me, as someone who is not very familiar in the field of renewable energy, I mostly associate renewables, like the use of it and the research, with developed countries. But I was super interested to see that, in fact, Kenya is the country with the most per capita solar energy systems in the world. And also in Latin America, in Costa Rica and Brazil, 85% of all energy use comes from renewable sources. And it's not only super interesting to look at the use of it, but also about the research and development aspect of renewable energy. Because this industry offers huge opportunities to build more capital-intensive industries and for countries to build technical knowledge. And two countries that have really leveraged the potential of this already are China and India, because they are making renewables kind of part of their industrialization process. So these countries have realized that there is a really steep learning curve in this industry, and that's the production of wind, solar, and water energy is really rapidly becoming more cost effective. So for me and my colleagues at Lund, it's super interesting to see this amazing potential that renewable energy has in developing country settings. And I'm happy that you're also really interested in that, because today we have two really knowledgeable guest speakers who are going to inform us more about this. So first we have Mr. Ducoing. Thank you so much for being here, our professor here at Lund University. And also we have Yang, who works in the field of renewable energy and can share with us her practical knowledge about the field. So soon they will start. Mr. Ducoing will first have a short 25-minute lecture. Please, when you start, could you please introduce yourself a little bit? It would be super interesting for us to know a bit more about you. And then Yang will have her presentation. And when they are both finished, we will have the floor open to any questions or any remarks about the topic. So please remember to write down any questions you may have or write them in the chat to our moderator. So thank you so much for being here. Then I will open the floor for Mr. Ducoing to share his screen and start presenting.
Well, thank you so much for the presentation, Amber. Do you hear me okay? I am really happy to be here, well, to be online here. I have seen in the names some of my former students, so it's really nice to see that they are interested after maybe a too much Professor Ducoing in their courses, and they're still here. So really happy to share my knowledge. I am first, I am not professor. I am a senior lecturer. That is a small but quite important difference in the academic world. So, but thank you. Maybe in 15 years, but today just university lecturer. I am a researcher in natural resources and development, and for this reason, I was super interested to give this talk, because I am not. This is not a conference; it's more like a few state of the art on the renewables in developing countries. And currently I am working on this more in the area of the alternative measure of development, natural resources as engines for development. And of course, energy is like it could be like energy is the main natural resources that we have, and for us it's like the best idea, the best example of natural resource course is oil, for example. All fossil fuels is like the example of natural resource course, and all the processes that are linked to the use of natural resources. So this is my main field. I have been in Lund. This is going to be my 4th year at Lund. And I am working with a group now of people in energy transitions in the historical perspective. And we are working especially in the role of capital stock in energy transition. So it's something that I would like to talk today too, regarding especially the case of Afghanistan. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen, and if you want, if you like the presentation, or if you want to have some of the graphs, just send me an email and I can share it with you to post it in your webpage. So, full screen mode. So, well, my presentation is going to be divided in 5 parts. I'm going to talk about I'm going to do some kind of motivation of what we're going to talk in this 25 minutes. A really short description of energy transition, what means energy transition, what are the theaters of energy transitions. Then I'm going to give some examples of how the renewable energy matrix is taking a noticeable part of the matrix in the developing countries. And finally, and this is just, I am not an expert on Afghanistan. I have been supervisor of 2 theses on Afghanistan, and now I am supervisor of 1 thesis that I'm going to mention now in the lecture on Afghanistan. And finally, I'm going to do not conclusion. I'm sorry if I wrote conclusion. This is more like what I think, or what I some kind of forecast that we can do for the future regarding the renewable energy. Okay, so
Cristián,
let's start.
Sorry, maybe if you can click full screen, because we can see also the surrounding of your screen. Is that possible?
I put it full screen, Amber, but I don't know. Maybe if I share, maybe if instead of share the screen, I share the delete. If I share let's see, then, how do you see them?
Yes, that is great. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. So the motivation, what we are talking about, renewables, why we need to change our energy matrix. This is this graph is the answer to this. So the deviation of global temperatures in the last 30 years are incredibly high, for 40 years maybe, if we take until today, until 2021. And how it is calculated, the deviation of the temperatures, the researchers on climate, they have done an average between 1950 and 1980. And you see here that it's like quite stagnated. And we compare the mean of this period, the period between 1950 to 1980. And then we see this incredible upward trend in temperatures in the last 30, 40 years. So in just to give you an example, in the last 10 years, we had 4 years that are in the top 10 of the most warm years of the history that we have regarding temperatures. So the deniers of climate change are few and are not scientific. So yeah, the debate is this. So how we can manage this incredible amount of rising temperatures in the next 30 years before we achieve the catastrophe that is 3 or 4 degrees more of the current temperatures. So why we have done this terrible mistake is because we didn't know. Our ancestor, our grandfather, they didn't know that the emissions of fossil fuels will be a horrible damage for our environment. So as you see, and Amber, I think that she mentioned that to become developed, to achieve development, we need energy. This is clear. Even the most clean source of energy, it's going to do some kind of harm to the environment. This is clear. We can't be naive here. Solar panels, they have an incredible amount of value chains that brings extraction of minerals, extraction of several components. Just the trade of the solar panels is something that is doing some emissions. So if we change totally the matrix, probably we are going to avoid the climate catastrophe. But even that, we have to be clear that the amount of energy that we are consuming now, it has some kind of externalities, even this energy is clean, okay? So if we see here, this is the global direct primary energy consumption from all the sources that we have in energy. So if you see here until 1850, the main share of the consumption was traditional biomass. So until the 1850, we were in peace with the environment. We were consuming just mainly traditional biomass, and the traditional biomass, it has a quite few amount of CO2 and greenhouse emissions. So when start the problem? When we start to create the current situation? When started the first industrial revolution, and when the first industrial revolution was exported from England to the rest of the countries. And then, if you see here, the amount of coal, oil, and gas are the main source of energy in all the countries now. There are just few countries that they have renewable sources as the main part of their matrix. The great majority, even the countries that are doing really great efforts in transition to cleaner energy sources, they have a quite dependence on fossil fuels. Even they don't produce these fossil fuels in their territories, because these countries depend too much on the production of countries that they have a lot of fossil fuels. So I know that some of my Danish friends here are going to be angry, but always I use the example of Denmark, that the outsourcing of CO2 emission by Denmark is a clear example that this is a global problem. Denmark has reduced a lot their CO2 emissions, but they still import a lot of goods from abroad that are quite intensive in CO2 emissions. So the problem is global, and even Denmark has done incredible efforts in the reduction of the emission in the Danish territory, and the same for Sweden, and the same for Norway, and the same for Iceland, maybe. The reduction of the emissions, it doesn't matter if there is no global reduction of emission. This is simple. Huh? The CO2 emissions is a global problem. So Norway, for example, the electricity production is 97% from hydroelectricity. Totally clean energy source. But which is the main export by Norway?
Oil, isn't it?
Oil. So it's like we are quite clean here, but we are putting the dirty under the mat. So this is the thing, and I am not saying that these countries are there's some kind of hypocrisy here. No, this is like the incentives are this. So the incentives is like, it's better to reduce our emissions, but if we don't reduce our emission in a global perspective, in a global in a global agreement, it doesn't matter that one country and a quite a small country as Denmark reduce their emissions. So, but Denmark is the best example, but Sweden is also a good example. Norway is also a good example. So, sorry, Christopher. Huh? Okay, so my students, they know that I take a long time to enter to the topic, so sorry. But here are the energy transitions. So it's quite simple. The definition of energy transition is the gradual substitution of one energy source or type of energy source by another through history. And the best example and the best example of this is here, when the traditional biomass in England was replaced by the coal. No? And from organic sources to coal, fossil fuels, Britain during the Industrial Revolution, the second Industrial Revolution, and the gradual replacement of oil and natural gas, and fossil fuels to renewable energy. That this is our hope, okay? This it should be the energy transition that will help us to achieve a better future for all of us and for our children, grandchildren, etc., for the next generation. This is the definition of sustainability. If we don't save our environment for the next generation, we are not achieving sustainability, and there is no possibility of sustainable development. And again, I take the really good quote by Amber: there is no development without energy. And if we want to bring development, if we want to help the development of less developed countries, we need energy, and we need clean energy sources. So what is the problem? And here, if we all agree that we need renewable energy sources, why we are not doing a great effort to achieve a bigger matrix, a higher share of the matrix by renewables? Because there is something that is called path dependence, and some countries, they have been quite slow in the replacement of the previous energy sources. Britain, for example, they achieved the same amount of CO2 emissions than in 1894, 2 years ago. So the exit from coal and fossil fuels from Britain, it lasted more than 100 years. Argentina, it was some kind of developed country at the beginning of the 20th century, and a quite clear example of the middle income trap in the last 50, 60 years. It was dependent on coal and fossil fuels until now. And now the share of the renewable energy is taking some kind of noticeable part of the energy matrix, but the share of the coal in Argentina, it lasted around 80 years. So there are several theories regarding the energy transition, but the empirical observations say that energy transition are painful and long and quite slow. So there are some countries that are better prepared to do an energy transition, but if we see this graph, for example, there is an incredible correlation between the share of the organic energies and the GDP per capita, and this is from Latin America. And somebody mentioned Costa Rica. Costa Rica is a super good example because Costa Rica did the change from coal to oil in just 5 years. Why? Because they didn't have any kind of capital stock in oil. So it was a country that it doesn't matter for them to change their capital stock to a new energy source. And this is the problem of the energy transitions in the developing countries. Maybe they don't have the capital stock, the path dependence to change to another source, but they don't have the enough demand and capital to pay for the new energy sources. And here is the example. The countries that were richer in Argentina, in Latin America, they were using less organic energies. So these countries, the richer countries, it was more difficult for them to change from one source to another. The poorest countries, they were in a better position to change or even to catching up with another sources of energy. But the problem is that they didn't have the money to change for another energy sources. One of the great problems to promote renewables in developing countries is that some of the countries that we can say that the richest countries of the developing countries, for example, India and China, that here are like this incredible, the bigger in the graph. This graph is representing the emission intensity, as is how many CO2 per capita, and here the income per capita of them. And if you see these countries with a less income per capita, they are emitting more CO2 per capita than richer countries. And the intensity. So they're less efficient in the use of energy than the richest countries. So what is saying this? That these countries, they have a quite dependent on fossil fuels. And why it's important to show here India? Because all the time, all the people that hope that renewables are going to take out fossil fuels, they use the example of India, that the price of the price of solar is cheaper in India than fossil fuels. Yes, but what is the problem of this, or why India is not changing all the energy matrix to renewables, especially solar? Because the infrastructure of India is dependent on fossil fuels. And this is the great problem of renewables. This is the thing that nobody takes into account. Well, nobody, but sometimes is overlooked in the research of renewable energy. The amount of infrastructure that is dependent on fossil fuels before to change to renewable energy. And this is something that policymakers must take into account in the goals for energy sources. So for the firms, for the consumers, it should be attractive, not just in the final price, but also in the infrastructure that you need to include a new energy matrix. And here is a really nice graph on the energy prices. And again, we come back to the question. If the price of the solar photovoltaic is so small now, it has dropped from 300 megawatts till 68 megawatts. Why we are using nuclear energy that is more expensive now than the solar? Because there are 100 nuclear power stations in Europe that the price that we paid for them is so expensive that to taking out this nuclear power station is super expensive for the society. So it's better to continue using this nuclear station. I am talking just in in monetary terms, it's better to take to continue using this nuclear power station than replace it for solar. So, well, at least nuclear is not is not producing the amount of CO2 that is producing the fossil fuels, but are quite dangerous, as we have seen in Chernobyl and Fukushima. So this is the thing. So when the people with the researcher or some people present that, look the price of the solar, how big is the drop since 2010 till now? Yes, it has dropped a lot, but it's not clear that it's going to replace immediately the other sources, because there's a hidden price, a sunk cost that is not taken account in these prices, okay? So I have talked a lot, so now I'm going for the case of Afghanistan. Why I wanted to talk a bit about Afghanistan, because Afghanistan, it will be like the guinea pig for all this. I am supervising a thesis, a quite interesting thesis by Christopher Lacour, and he wants to see how it could be better the use of the funds that are going to Afghanistan to promote the solar energy, especially in the rural grid of Afghanistan. Why I wanted to talk a bit about Afghanistan, because it's a country that has been in war since 1980. In different terms, in different levels of war, they have been in conflict since 1980, and even we can talk about 1976, but just taking the Soviet invasion in 1980, it has been in constant conflict since 1980. What means that? That first, destroy of capital stock and no investment. The amount of investment during this period, it has been quite small and not noticeable in the electricity and energy grid. So for this reason, it's a really good example to see it could be possible to build a new, totally renewable energy matrix from scratch. Well, some facts about Afghanistan. Population, 28 million, GDP per capita, one of the lowest income in the world, 1,177. Life expectancy, 60 years. It seems that I forgot to put it, but life expectancy is about 60 years. The Human Development Index, it's extremely low, 0.5. And electricity consumption, 6.2 billion kilowatt hours. That is really, really low. So this is a graph that Christopher did for the thesis that he's writing. And this is quite interesting if you see this graph, because as we have, well, we didn't agree, but I take that the introduction by Amber is correct. And when we say that we need energy to develop, I believe that we need energy to become to progress, to achieve sustainable development. And if you see the consumption, the consumption of electricity, it has been rising, but not at the same rate that the GDP per capita. And this is quite interesting in another point of view that, for example, it has been proven that is a better proxy of economic development and economic activity, the electricity, than the GDP. Why? Because the changes in the GDP are sometimes not taken into account in the national accounts. And for this reason, it's a better indicator or proxy of economic activity, electricity. So what is going to happen with Afghanistan? Well, this is something that we are going to see in the thesis by Christopher, and he's going to finish this thesis the 25 or 24 of May. I don't remember which is the deadline, but then we are going to see what is going to happen with Afghanistan. Well, or at least we are going to have more idea with Afghanistan. But I am quite interested in this thesis and the research of Afghanistan because of this. It's a country that it doesn't it doesn't have the bad dependence on fossil fuels. They use fossil fuels, of course, but they don't have the infrastructure to depend on the fossil fuels. We can build from the beginning. But one of the problems to construct, to build a network on solar grid is that you need the demand for this. And there is a demand, but maybe not at the same rate that we need to build a whole new network on solar grid. And one of the things that Christopher has been researching here is the amount of corruption. Around 65% of the funds by the OECD and especially USA that it has been invested in Afghanistan has been transformed, deviated from Afghanistan to foreign banks and foreign accounts. This means that 65% of the amount of money that it has been invested in new renewables in Afghanistan, it has been deviated for another goals, another pockets, and other people, and not exactly the goal to bring solar electricity to Afghanistan. Conclusion, these are not conclusions, these are my ideas. This is the thing that I think that is going to be researched in the future regarding energy transition and renewables. And from economic history, from the energy history, there are lessons but not guidelines because each country is different. And now we have something that we didn't have in the past, that it's a global problem. We didn't have the climate change and global warming challenge. Path dependence is the norm, but there are exceptions, and this is important. We are going to see path dependence is quite important to understand the energy transition, but countries of Afghanistan is a quite good exception. Costa Rica is a quite good exception. Mainly small countries are a good exception and a good example of that we can do energy transition faster than in the past. Renewable energy carriers are the solution, but they need a more aggressive public policy. This is clear because the sunk cost of the fossil fuels and no cleaner energy sources are quite high. And even we want everything from renewables, the countries, they need a diversified matrix because, for example, in solar, we don't have yet the technology for the storage. So this must be gradual. So we need to replace, of course, fossil fuels, but to replace it, we need some kind of diversification in the matrix because the countries, they could suffer from energy shortage in the future. And as I said, Afghanistan could achieve development through clean energies, but without a reduction of the corruption in the sector and improving the linkage, because one thing is to buy all the solar panels from China, for example, but this is not developing any kind of industrial development in the country. That this is something quite important, and more than industrial, maybe some kind of technologies that it could be developed in the country. Industrialization is not the only path to development. This is clear. And well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for your talk. I found it really interesting and really cool also that you've talked about Christopher's thesis. It seems really interesting that there's a lot of like new knowledge in the field and that things are being like developed really fast. You spoke about this learning curve, and that actually for me it's crazy that they still take into account so much this sunk cost as a barrier to transition. And this is like in every side of the business world a problem, I guess. But yeah, thank you so much for your talk. Really interesting. So then now we will have Jan, who will Yeah, also give us a short lecture.
Can you guys hear me? Great. Well, hi, I guess I will just start from a brief introduction about myself. My name is Yang. I am the board member of Changemaker in Slum, which is a social venture doing microfinancing projects in Kenya, focusing on energy, agriculture, leadership programs. I also work for MbeguSolar AB, which is a for-profit social business. And we build basically a platform connecting African entrepreneurs with solar energy using a novel self-financing mechanism. So for today, I think it's a very interesting topic. And for my part, I will be focusing more on our practical experience of bringing clean and affordable energy to the people in emerging markets. And hopefully could also give you guys some inspiration for later discussion. I think Christine touched upon this already, but if we take a look at the past decades, so we see the power generation cost was falling year by year rapidly. And right now, nearly 1 billion people globally still live without access to electricity. And in sub-Saharan Africa, half of the population still live in the dark. So we might wonder why it is still a problem. Well, I was pretty lucky since I was working for Changemaker Slums since 2015 in Kenya. In 2018, I got the chance to also visit our partners in the fields in rural Kenya. So we visited Nairobi, Nakuru, and also Homa Bay, which is in the west of Kenya. There we talked to a lot of local people. Majority of them mentioned one common problem or the struggle that they're facing, which was about the access to the grids. That was very problematic. And that, of course, leads to a lot of consequences. Well, Jaisha was one of the person we talked to in that trip. So he is running a small phone charging business as a local businessman in his small village in Homa Bay. And because he doesn't have access to reliable grids, Jaisha got a lot of problem about the electricity, which leads to the loss of his customers. Therefore, he couldn't support his family and also sustain himself. Together with other colleagues, we thought, what if we could enable Jaisha to power his business with solar? And then we designed an experiment, which is what you guys can see from this photo, a solar-powered phone charging station. And of course, it's a manual station. User from community have to get the key to access the locker. So with 12 lockers, Jaisha was part of this experiment to test how solar could make a difference to his business. Well, the first couple of weeks it went sort of very well, but then we started to hear some of the feedback from Jaisha, I think starting from the 4th week. The first feedback was about the capacity of this station. We noticed from the data we gathered, not all of the 12 lockers was used all the time by all of the customers. And some customers come very early in the beginning, some come very late. So considering also the size and how much Jaisha could afford, we started to discuss whether this is really the right size for Jaisha. Then we, together with our engineer, we optimized the capacity of the solar units for Jaisha to minimize the size, making sure it's small enough for Jaisha to afford by himself. And then we continued that experiment. after a few more weeks, we got some new feedback from Jaysha. And this time, Jaysha mentioned about how much money he was generating every month. He also mentioned his concern whether it's good enough amount that he could sustain himself in the long run. And because of the business, it's going well, Jaysha was also thinking about expanding his business. But since this unit, as you can see, it's only for phone charging, he was also asking, what are the other possibilities? Is there any other ways could, access other business using the solar power from those units? Therefore, we decided to do something a little bit different. So this time, of course, first step, we minimized the size of the station, which, as you can see, that's the smaller size of the hardware station. And in addition to that, we also added a software platform. So not only the hardware that enabled Jaysha to access the phone charging business, but also he could use the software platform to provide other digital services, also access the user interface from there to get more data of his business. So Jaysha was basically the first customer of that product. And later, of course, we had second Jaysha, third Jaysha, and now we're working with 30 customers in this similar area in West Kenya. And of course, along this journey, we made a lot of mistakes, also got a lot of lesson learned. So here I will just try to summarize some of the interesting lessons we learned on the ground. The first one was, of course, to understand the customer. There's just a lot to learn from our rural customers. I think in the beginning, while we were still doing the customer interviews, we were trying to gather information about what's their real need of using a solar sourced power generation equipment. And we started, of course, from the remote customer interviews because we still have the physical distance. So from the data collection process there, we asked the customer, so what do you want to use solar for in your daily life? And of course, we got different types of answers. Some of them want to use it for lighting, some want to use it for ironing, for radio, you name it. And then when we did that calculation, such a solar product was not affordable enough for them to access all of the services. And then we start to rethink again, do they really need all of those features? Or those are most likely good to have features? And then we rephrased a little bit about our questions. Instead of asking what's their need, what do they want, but what are they currently consuming? Are they really using solar for or diesel or other power source they could access at the moment for ironing, or it's just lighting? That's their basic needs. And then, of course, we see the differences. What they really need is not necessarily what they're currently consuming. So that's just one example. There are also some other examples. I think quite a lot from their behavior. Sometimes when we ask our users about their feedback, if they like this feature or that, how are they satisfied? You normally get positive feedback, but when you really see people are paying for it, or they are opting for other options, then you know the real answer from there. I think another example could be about M-Pesa, similar like Kenya Swish. So that's the mobile payment platform people use to pay for the charging services and then get the PIN codes to access the locker. We previously didn't, or let's say our assumption, haven't considered much whether they would prefer to pay first and access the services later, or it's the other way around. So we assumed that was not a big issue at all. But later, while we were really bringing the product to the customer, we see people actually prefer to access the charging services while pay for it, right? Then it's quite different about the user case. Then we have to also design in a different way. So I think those type of things, so sometimes you get information from data collection, sometimes you also have to really be there, observe, and also put ourselves in their shoes and really understand what's their need. So that's about the first lesson. Second one, building a system approach. Here when we say customer, we're referring to the people that's going to use the product services we're providing. In some cases, they are also called beneficiaries. So regardless, customer beneficiaries, there are also many other stakeholders being part of this whole value chain. It could be about local organizations, it could be about local governments, it could be also about international suppliers. Because it's a system problem, let's put it this way. So we see also the solution should be a system approach. So all of the stakeholders that could be possibly contributing to this, this overall solution could be also considered as well, right? If, let's say, we want to have microfinance institution co-finance the units, then what's their need? What's the added value to them from this value chain? Same for suppliers, right? If the struggle here is not just about sending a solar equipment from Nairobi to the fields, but also about distribution, but also about procurement, supply chain, then how we really engage those stakeholders to address those challenges. So that's what we nerds very, let's say, helpful for us to really come up with something that's gonna most likely solve the issue that our customers are facing, which should be a system approach. The third thing is, this one is a bit general or straightforward, making mistakes and just learn from it. This photo we took, it's the first time we brought this mining station to the fields. And you can see that's the way how people from community was reacting towards it. People were very curious. It's first time they saw this type of thing. They don't know what kind of services it's providing. They don't even know how they could also access that. And that's the same way we would be seeing from their perspective as well. And that's also the same way how we see our customer. So it's a new market. There's a lot of unknown. So most of the things that we have, or the knowledge we have, they're based on our assumptions. And to really understand the market, the customer, and also their needs, we also have to be very careful, observe, and be open about what kind of feedbacks we get in the fields. So that's of course a lot of potential of making mistakes. A recent one I think we experienced was last December when we brought the auto station to the fields. We of course tested the product in Nairobi. Everything was working perfectly, but then things happened in the fields. The product was facing some basic functionality problem, which we didn't expect it at all. And of course, that's because in rural area, we have the network issue we might not have in Nairobi. And then, of course, we have to get back of our products and fix the issue. Also, just rethink about our overall solution, because previously we were using GSM, which requires the good network for our customer or users to receive the SMS, therefore access the locker. And because of this experiments, we now consider it's OTP, the one-time password, to somehow avoid that problem. And of course, there will be also other experiments we designed and added into our new iteration plan for the production in May. So this time we're gonna simulate the testing, putting the product firstly somewhere close to Nairobi, where we still have a lot of engineers supports if something goes wrong, and where also we can see some real feedback from the customer and the user. So it's a lot of constant learning and reflections, yeah, just making mistakes and move forwards from there. So now if we take a look at the old question again, why it is still a problem? I think from our very limited experience, we see a lot of challenges coming from the consumer side. We know, solar PV or PV technologies, available solutions, they're out there, but why consumers, they're not accessing them? So there are challenges we see about affordability. There are also challenges we see about accessibility, availability, sometimes even awareness. So it's not just about bringing a physical solar PV or solar product to the customer, but also putting ourselves in their shoes, also observe and see what's their real need. If they have been given such a product, do they really know how to use it? Or do they really know how to turn the valuable product of such a product to change their livelihoods and make an impact in their community? So it's quite a lot about consumer challenges. And then on the other hand, about the system approach, how to also engage other stakeholders in this value chain, come up with a systematic approach that's also creating value to them, right? Because if we're not just thinking about charity or aid, it must be something also makes sense to them, financially, non-financially, sometimes both. So that's briefly what we learned from our short story. And that's pretty much it. We're also currently looking for new team members to join our Sweden team. So if any one of you are interested, just feel free to write me or just take a look at our website. We have 2 vacancies right now, one for operation, one for as technical lead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yang. That was as well a very interesting presentation and fun to learn more about after reading on your webpage and so forth, and to hear it directly from you. So we're very happy that you both are joining us today. So I think it's time for us to open up for some questions. For all attendees, you are more than welcome to ask them yourself, or you can use the chat function to let us know the question and we will ask them for you. Maybe we can go straight away with one question that I've received, which is it is directed to Cristián. What is the role of subsidies given to fossil energy in the path dependency that hinders a fast transition towards cleaner energy mattresses?
Well, this is a really good question, and I will like to don't have problems answering this because there's a big industry besides behind the fossil fuel. But it's true that one of the reasons why still we are using fossil fuels is that the indirect subsidies. For example, one of the main indirect subsidies is for the automobile industry. In Europe, the role of the automobile industry, the car industry, is so big that still the government, they fight each other to bring one of their factories to their cities. And there is a lot of subsidies by the state, but indirect subsidies that we don't see these subsidies to the car industry, that even there is a big change in some of these car factories to produce electric cars, still the main share of the cars are combustion fossil fuels engines. So yes, there is a role by the subsidies, and I think that mainly for not exactly the fossil fuels directly to the subsidy directly to fossil fuels, but more the hidden subsidies, like for the kind of products of capital goods that they are still using fossil fuels. But yes, I think that then is one of the problems to take care over fossil fuels. I raise my hand because I have a question for Jan. Can I do it? Really interesting your presentation, and because one of the problems that we have the academy, the teachers in the university is that we don't have real real contact with the world, and sometimes we are just analyzing data, text, everything. And I have been really lucky to see people like you doing this work in my time as teacher. And well, first, I congratulations for your work. Congratulations for this this firm and the entrepreneurship that is behind this. My question is, how do you choose the field work? How do you choose the place that you are going? Do you have like a map of countries, village, cities that you have decided as potential future customers? There is more like some kind of previous network that it is bringing you to specific cities, or there is a more cost-effective analysis, cost-benefit analysis behind.
Yeah, thanks. I think your presentation is very interesting. Just try to avoid complimenting each other. But getting back to your question, well, we started in Kenya, I think mostly because I previously worked there, so we have some good contacts and networks started from there. Also, the sort of customer interview and experiments all started from there. And then within, like inside of this country, we had some comparison study or feasibility study in different regions, but not like all of the regions. So it's not very comprehensive pre-study per se, but partially because some other reasons, and partially also, you know, some small comparison. Yeah.
Then when we are talking about this, we have another question, which is directed to Yang, about whether your company makes profits on your business.
Yeah, so it's a very good question. So we are a for-profit company. The way we measure it, so we look at not only the financial aspect, but also the social impact aspects. And financial aspect, that's a very important measurements for us. So yes, in short, for profit.
All right, I can't see anyone raising their hands, so I will continue reading from the questions that have been sent to us, which is, it is directed to Cristián, regarding what do you think about, perhaps we have been giving a sense already from your question to Yang, but what do you think about Yang's approach in similar businesses?
Shit. I don't get it. What I think about approach, or what I think of this kind of approach?
Yeah, what do you think about this kind of approach?
Well,
or business.
Business, huh? Business is everything. Huh? We need people like Yang and this kind of film to bring awareness that there's sources that are energy sources that are there, and we can use it, and we can invest on this. Continue with development, but without damaging the environment. But I want to link this with the question, the previous question, that if this profitable, it was the question to Yang, and she said that is difficult. This is something that you have to think. You have to take into account this, and it's related to this idea that we see the prices of solar. We are seeing that the prices of the solar photovoltaic energy is quite cheaper in theory than the rest. But why is not profitable? And this is a real good question. So we have seen this amazing. Sorry, my kid. Santi. You know that today is holiday here, so we have both at home. If we have this incredible downward trend in solar cost, why we are not changing all our energy sources to solar? This is the first question. Why there are no firms that are investing in solar energy? Why not all the investment are going from fossil fuels that were dropping the prices during the COVID-19 pandemic in the first period to solar? Have you think about this? Like, do you remember at the beginning of March 2020, which was the price of the oil? Yang, you have to know this. Which was the price of the oil?
Yeah.
Around, not exactly the figure.
Yeah. Well, I will start from the first question you asked. I think one example I could think about is pay as you go. I don't know any of you guys are familiar with pay as you go. So basically, pay as you go companies, they're solving the problem, addressing the affordability issue of the consumer in emerging markets of accessing renewable energy. Essentially, they are providing a software solution, because one of the problems consumers are facing is they have to save a long time of their little revenue to transit to solar energy. So pay as you go help them to, instead of paying a lot of money at once, but little by little. So they can pay, I think, 15 to 500 Kenyan shilling per day. So that's pretty affordable for them, and they could just start with some down payment and then annual monthly payment plan like this. And it's a very good success, especially in East Africa. If we take a look at the market in Kenya, there are so many foreign companies very active in this sector. And Gaza, it's based in San Francisco. They provide this software, and they try to also collaborate with other hardware providers. So they integrate that software into all different types of hardware solar products to sell it as a package to the customer. And then we also have MCOPA, which is I think it's a UK-based company, but they do also have a lot of operation in Kenya. They also have a company there. They're essentially a fintech company, but they're providing solar solutions as well. And there's also I think there's also a Danish company providing also pay-as-you-go solutions in emerging markets. So sometimes when we talk about why it is still a problem and why people are not really accessing them, it's not just problem coming from the product side, but a lot of system problems. Mm-hmm. And then how to come up with a solution addressing those challenges would essentially or potentially really do a big favor for many other players in this sector. I don't know, I would also want to ask other students or participants in this event, maybe they could also share some of their thoughts about why you guys think it is still a problem. I assume everyone is coming from different places, so you guys might also have some very good insights from your personal experience. So that might also make this discussion much more interesting as well.
Oh, sorry, I was starting to speak without unmuting. Yeah, I'm not particularly sure if I can answer exactly on what you were asking, but I was wondering more, I'm really interested in more policy and action points in which really can be changed something, because often in academia I feel we are suggesting policy changes or addressing the fact oh, there needs to change something in policy. Cristián, you mentioned that as well, that in order for infrastructure is dependent on the fossil fuels, and in order to change that, there needs to change something in policy. What would be, according to you, an example of what would need to change? What is a policy that would really benefit this industry or this field? Because it sounds I cannot get an example in my head.
But you are asking the Nobel Prize question, which is the policy to. I think that, well, maybe this is one of the problems that we have had in academia, that we are looking for one solution answer, like the big answer, but this is a complex system, and as Yang was saying, that there is a systematic blockade to new energy sources, and this, and I'm not going to be in this conspiracy theory. No, this systems are different, are difficult to change, and systems are quite complex. And energy systems are extremely complex because it's a mix between the demand, environment, and the supply. So one of the main examples that I have done in my lectures, that 5 years ago it was the example that this is it's really difficult to change a fossil fuel based system is Germany. 5 years ago, if we see the share of solar in the electricity production in Germany, it was quite low in terms of the investment by the state and all the policy for energy transition that it was done in Germany. But when I prepared the course for energy transition, I was using the data of 2016, 2017. But the last year, 2020, linked to the COVID-19 crisis, for the share of solar rised a lot in Germany and is now around the 20-25% in the production of electricity. And the last year, for first time, renewables, but this is taking into account all the renewables, and there are some renewables that are not so green, if we want to put it in some easy term. For example, hydroelectricity, there's not CO2 emission from the production of the electricity, but there is a quite big externalities in the terrain, in the area that you are doing the dams and all the infrastructure that you need for hydroelectricity. For first year, since we have data, renewables, the share of the renewables in the electricity production in Europe was higher than the rest of the than fossil fuels. So it was really good news, but we don't know if the rebound effect is going to be high this year and the next year regarding fossil fuel, because one of the problems of the rebound effect is that when the fossil fuels, the price of the fuels, in this case, the fossil fuel prices were down, there is an incentive to invest or at least to consume more of these products. So there was a reduction of the CO2 emission, for example, the last year, clear because of all the quarantines and the lockdown that there was around the world. But now in February, the CO2 emissions per capita globally were higher than in February of 2020. So ceteris paribus, 2021, we are recovering the CO2 emissions that we lost the last year. So I am, of course, that I want a clean energy source, and of course that I want that we move out from the fossil fuels, but it's not easy. It's not easy, and the amount of policies, the amount of coordination that it must be during this process is extremely, extremely difficult. And I want to be I want to be optimistic, but the data sometimes it's give you more pessimistic views about the future. I hope not. I hope that I am grown and this data of this year is going to be maybe a mirage, but not a reality. But I was shocked when I saw that why we are emitting more than in February 2020. We should learn something from what happened.
Do you think that one problem could be that there's a lack of connection between academia and researchers who know about the potential of renewable energy sources and policymakers?
Absolutely. Well, there is you, Amber, you have been in the Master of Economic Growth, I guess. Yeah. You have to see the amount of paper that are produced in the academia that nobody reads. And the amount of really good reports from the international organizations, even firms, that nobody reads. So there is a lack of dialogue between academia and policymakers that is extremely, extremely bad for future developments in policy regarding energy sources. And in the academia, we have learned a lot about energy transition, and there is a lot of research, and I am working now with people from Max Planck Institute on energy transitions, and they are from physics, and they are really concerned that in the majority of the economic models, energy is not part of these models. It should be, of course, it should be. But if you see just the IPCC report, even that is a really great effort, there is a lot of policy recommendation there that nobody takes into account. So yes, it's sad, but sad but true, as say Metallica. But I don't want to be too pessimistic. There are another good news regarding the energy sources and the amount of solar that it's been invested, and especially in developing countries, there are really good news regarding renewables. The doubt is this going to be enough to save the planet?
Astrid, did you have a question?
Yeah. Well, I obviously lack knowledge about this topic, but I'd like to come back to your question, Yang, about the problem. And I feel like one challenge is that approaches have lacked a local sense or a place-specific perspective, maybe top-down, which have enabled the continuation of the existing path, as though creating or strengthening the path dependency, so to say. But from my readings, I feel like this is changing a little bit now. But maybe both of you or one of you could maybe mention that. How is it now? Is it like this, or is it changing? Is this an issue?
I have talked too much, so I think that Jan could start.
Yeah. Well, I mean, from my observation, I think it is changing. I'm thinking about like the different types of product that's more and more consumer could access right now. Previously, it was more like solar lamp and those type of very small size solar units. That's the most popular type of product. And since 2010, I think solar home system is getting also more and more popular. Now I think I'm talking mostly the African market or emerging markets. And it's also, of course, because the emerge of pay-as-you-go solution, more consumers started to access those solar units. And now a lot of people in rural area, I think even MCOPA, they started to sell mobile phones. So I see there is some improvements for sure, and people start to consume more while they get there. And another aspect, I'm more thinking about impact investments. Because I work, for startups, we talk to investors, and this few years, I think impact investment is also getting pretty popular, especially in Nordic. I think there are more investors looking at, not only the traditional type of tech companies, but also potential impacts. They are addressing issue for climates, for the environment. So of course there should be a potential. That's why they're doing so. And there's also more readings coming out, like how they quantify the markets from more academic way, I guess. So I see there is a transition.
Thank you.
I have a question, but maybe it's more of a reflection, which is related to what Amber and Cristián talked about previously, about policies and the whole transitioning, how it needs to be, how you can't just go from one source to another, and how you can see the complexity of this issue prevailing in Sweden, for example. I have just been taking like notes from the media, so maybe it's not necessarily reflecting the true side of it, but how they're talking about how Sweden is trying to become more and more green, but we don't have actually the energy to be able to support this, maybe right now and from a short-term perspective, because we simply don't have enough resources, maybe energy sources to supply our population. Does anyone have any take on this?
Well, now that you mention Sweden, Magnus Lindmark is a professor, a real professor, not like me, in Umeå, and he has researched a lot on the environmental Kuznets curve in Sweden, and in a chapter that he wrote like 2 years ago, he wrote quite clear which is the role of Sweden regarding climate change and global warming. And he says something similar that I was mentioning here. Sweden can reduce all the greenhouse emissions that they want, but it's not going to be enough to change the trend. But Sweden could become an example for another countries. So how to keep the welfare state and at the same time become a green country, an environmental friendly country. And this is the role of Sweden. This is what Sweden should achieve, or should the goal of Sweden in the future. So for the rest of the countries that they have this dichotomy between economic growth and the environment, Sweden should show that there is no dichotomy and you can develop your country without destroying the environment. And Sweden did a quite big change in the 70s during the oil crisis, especially in the pulp and paper industry. The pulp and paper industry was really dependent on fossil fuels, and they changed it to biomass, to alternative sources of energy because of the market conditions. But it was a change that it has positioned, it had put the pulp and paper industry, the Swedish pulp and paper industry, as one of the global market leaders. So then you have an example of what a small country as Sweden should take as a goal. They become carbon neutral, of course, this is the goal, but to show that it's possible to do it at the same time that you keep the welfare and the well-being for your population.
All right. I can see that time is running really fast. So we have one final question, if no one else is raising their hand, which is directed to both of our speakers today. Is it a good thing for the expansion of renewable energies if public services in terms of energy provision are bad?
The last part?
So is it a good thing for the expansion of renewable energies if public services in terms of energy provision are bad?
But what do you mean with
bad?
Public service are bad? How do we define bad in this case?
Simon.
Simon, please.
It was my question.
No, don't worry.
It's true. It was a bit ambiguous, the formulation, but I was meaning like if the central energy net is not working, like there's no central network that provides all the citizens or all the people in the country with energy, is it then bad? Is that good for decentralized?
No. I get
it. Little hotspot villages getting in it.
Yeah. And this is regarding to path dependence. Sometimes you need a different solution if the previous solution regarding, for example, a grid that it was not doing the work to provide with electricity and energy to the whole population. This country or this region are going looking for new energy sources that it could solve the problem of the electricity consumption and electricity provision in a better way than the previous. Yes, sometimes it's better to have the bad examples are better for the new examples of the solar energy.
I guess I don't have much input there for this particular question, but I'm happy to take any new question if there's any, or just I think Christine has already mentioned something interesting there.
Then we have a final question for Yang, which is, in your company, do you have any people working on the field, or are you working remotely and doing your research remotely, and then you go to Kenya?
That's a very easy one. Thank you. Well, I think we have both a team based in Sweden, where we focus more on the partnership and the software. In Kenya, we also have a company based in Nairobi, a team based there as well. The only one that's working and living in the field, that's our field representative. So he's living originally also from Homa Bay, mostly dealing with customers in the fields. So I guess the reason why you're asking this was also somehow related to what I was discussing earlier, or I mentioned briefly earlier about the challenges that we faced. So I think for startup, especially early stage, where you're still, in the prototyping phase, it's you have to balance the resource that you have, and where you get the most useful information. But while you have already some sort of proof of concept, then it's very important you have your local appearance. It's not only for communication with customer, but also say communication with your suppliers locally. Also just deal with partnership. So I would say, while you have a limited resource in the beginning, just try to focus on your customer, get your proof of concepts, and when you get more resource, then you start to do more things. And it's very, very important to have the local appearance.
Okay, thank you. I think that was all of our questions today.
thank you everyone for participating today. Thank you so much, Cristián and Jan, for your interesting lectures. I hope everyone here found out something new for themselves. At least I did. So if you're interested in global development and would like to take part in spreading awareness on the global issues we face with regard to global development, we would gladly ask you to join Lund. We have basically two teams, event team that we organize in different lectures or seminar discussion like this one. And we also have magazine team who which writes different articles. Like currently we're working on rural development. So everyone can find something that would be interesting to work with. And here some contact information on Lund. So you can go on our website to find out more, and also we have a Facebook and Instagram page. So we also have new events coming, so please stay tuned, and we hope you have a good day, and thank you again so much for participating today.